next I'd like to talk about Ben Guggenheim. Ben is here with us today, and Ben made a video with his brother, Adam, and I'm going to let that video speak for itself, and then Ben is going to come up and address the group. Take it away, Chris.
Hey.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much. How's it going?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Alright. You ready to do this?
Yeah. 我第一个问题就是你为什么去了北京学中文？
关于中国这个国家，我什么都喜欢。我来中国主要的原因就是为了学习中文，但是我也爱上了中国的人民、菜、文化和历史。我有的最密切的朋友们就是中国人，还有一些也就是国籍跟我不一样的外国人，也来了中国就是为了学习。
北京的空气质量最近怎么样？
自从我到中国以来，空气质量不好的天不多。我在北京参加2个足球队和2个篮球队，我们差不多每天在外面训练，也没有发生了什么很重要的问题。不过我总是戴着一个口罩和我的吸入器，假如发生问题，我已经准备好了。看来中国政府那个共产党真的重视解决空气污染这个问题。他们关于保护环境的规则政策也已经付诸实施了，也已经有成果。
我明年上大学打算选择可持续发展专业，我也会学经济学。我希望有一天会有机会，可以用我的中文科学和经济知识，协调解决我们世界空气污染的问题。
我最后的问题是，你认为中国和美国的合作重要吗？
中国和美国这2个国家共同合作的时候，真的有成果。我觉得为了完全解决空气污染或者是地球暖化的问题，我们2个国家必须协同动作。
I'll use this. It's fine.
Okay.
Face the left and the right. Just a second, bring it back up.
Sure. Let's go. Or if you can take me all the way back to the top, that'd be great. Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. I've been volunteering at 1990 Institute for about 4 years now, and I've enjoyed every bit of it, especially working at the Teachers Workshop every year. I always learn so much, which is why I was so honored when I was offered to speak this year. So as I mentioned in the video, I actually haven't started attending college yet. I'm not an expert on anything. I don't have a degree, but what I do have is a story. This past year, I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to study in China at a Chinese high school. And my hope is that parts of my story, that you believe that parts of my story, or even a theme from my story, would benefit your students to hear. So in the 3rd grade, my best friend was half Chinese, and his mom really wanted him to study Mandarin and forced him to take lessons once a week. He did not enjoy this, and in order to make it more fun for him, she allowed him to invite a handful of friends to each one of his lessons, and I was one of those friends. And although this didn't last very long, the other kids became less and less engaged as the year went on. It was enough to spark an interest for me in Chinese. And so after the group disbanded, I continued studying Mandarin on my own with a teacher in Beijing via Skype. And I did this for about 5 years until I started attending high school, at which point I was able to study Mandarin in a classroom environment with a teacher and with classmates. I think this was really beneficial, being able to study Mandarin more than just once a week. I studied 3 to 4 times a week, depending on the year. And my knowledge of Chinese culture and language really expanded to the point that I felt comfortable and felt like I had a responsibility to give back to my community. And so I founded my own Chinese culture and language camp, and in total taught over 100 different students from MLK Bayside Academy and Bahia Vista Elementary, both schools in Marin County, just north of here. Great. And this brings me to this past year when I received a State Department scholarship to study at a Beijing high school for 9 months. So the scholarship was through the organization NSLI Y, or National Security Language Initiative for Youth. And the actual program that I was on was managed by a foreign education organization called American Councils. My program had 15 American students on it. And this is a picture of some of my friends and me as we're boarding the airplane to go to Beijing, having absolutely no idea what we're about to get ourselves into. While I was in Beijing, I attended Beijing number 80 High School, which was in Chaoyang District. And I lived on during the week, I lived on the 6th floor of the dorm building right there. Now, Beijing number 80 High School is pretty unique because not only does it have a student population of just under 3,000 Chinese students, but it also has a little bit over 100 international students. And all the international students live on the 6th floor. And so in addition to making Chinese friends throughout the year, I made friends from all over the world. Some of my best friends were from Korea, Ukraine, Serbia, Mongolia, Uzbekistan, Indonesia, Thailand. My roommate was from Tajikistan. And I had not planned to learn more about Tajikistan going to China. But of course, as a result of China's globalization and development, this ended up being the case. And over the weekends, I stayed with a host family. In the top left photo, you can see my host's mother, father, brother, aunt, uncle, grandma, cousin, and under the table, if you can see it, there's my host dog. And my host family was very generous towards me. Over the winter holidays, they took me traveling with them. In the upper right, that's me and my host brother in Harbin, which is northeastern China, in the negative 30 degree Fahrenheit. And in the bottom picture, that's me participating in my host dad's extended family reunion in Shanghai. I'm in the very bottom. It's a little blurry, but if you can't tell, there's not much family resemblance going on between me and the other people in the photo. Adjusting to life at a Chinese high school was very difficult at first. Every morning you're forced to wake up at 6 a.m. You attend class from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m., after which you get 2 hours off for dinner. But I played sports, so I either had soccer or basketball practice during that time, and I'd quickly eat some food as I was running to the court or the field. At 7, you return to your dorms for mandatory studying until 9 p.m. And then at 10 p.m., they shut off electricity. So the lights go off, and you really don't have much of a choice except to go to bed and start the day over the next morning. There are also some new strange protocols I had to get used to during my stay in Beijing, and hopefully this video works. No. Oh, you got it? Sorry. So this is the morning exercises. Earlier you saw a video of the students doing Michael Jackson. We didn't do Michael Jackson morning exercises, but it was just as interesting. No problem. So that was something to get used to. You know, thousands of kids lined up like they're about to march, moving their arms like this for about a half hour. Oh, now it works. Okay. But after a couple of weeks, I adjusted to this. I joined a soccer team. I joined actually a Tibetan soccer team while I was there. Those are some of my Tibetan friends in the upper left, and that's our soccer team in the bottom middle as well. I participated in the winter talent show and sang a Chinese song called 睡在我上铺的兄弟, which means my brother who sleeps in the top bunk. I led a march or a parade of international students at the school's Olympics, and I became class representative and class speaker at the graduation. And so by the end of my 9 months in Beijing, I felt like I had really become an integral member of the school community, of my host family, and by extension of both of these, really a part of China itself. I think that my successful integration into Chinese society is mainly a reflection of how hospitable Chinese people are. During my time in Beijing, no matter where I was, whether I was at school, on the soccer field, taking public transportation, or in the back of the cab, people were so excited to see a foreigner who was passionate about learning Chinese and would approach me and be willing to dedicate their time and energy to teaching me about Chinese language, culture, and really about their lives as well. I was spoiled by these opportunities to learn from Chinese people one-on-one about their lives. And I was also surprised to hear a resounding desire from these people for U.S.-China relations to improve and for more cross-cultural connections like this to be made in the future. And living and going to school in China really allowed me to witness China's modernization up close. This is something I had read about in the news for many years before going to China, but it was something completely different living there. In China, especially in the cities, everything is so fast and so new. I became accustomed to waiting no more than 30 seconds to catch a subway. I also enjoyed taking the bullet train on day trips outside of the city or even to more remote cities like Xi'an or Chengdu, and it was all just a few hours away. Something shocking about China was also that beggars there, instead of going up to you and receiving change, will approach you with their phone and ask you to scan them money. This is a shock to me. Because growing up, I'd always believed that the U.S. was the most cutting edge, the most advanced country, and yet going to China, living in an urban environment, especially in China, this is clearly not the case. They're very far ahead, and even more so, new technology such as facial recognition, as we talked about this morning, is implemented into their everyday lives. And I think one of my favorite examples about just how modern China has become is about Waimai, or takeout. So every Sunday, as my host dad would take us by car, me and my host brother, back to school, we would order takeout to receive at the gate of our school to bring to our dorms to eat later that night. And they would always get there before us. And this would frustrate my host dad because he would get a phone call from them saying, "Where are you? I'm at the gate of the school, here to deliver your food." And so we'd start calling in the order, or actually placing the order on our phone, just typing it in, later and later into our drive back to school, until it got to the point where we were ordering it 5 minutes before we got to school. And the last time we ordered it, my host dad threw a fit, and he swore, and he threw down his phone because he got a phone call. They had delivered the food in 2 minutes. And he was very frustrated by this. And this struck me because you would never hear of somebody complaining about how fast a delivery service was in the US, yet in China this seems to be a new issue. But of course, not everybody in China enjoys the same level of modernity. On bullet train trips between cities, or as I was on my way out to the Great Wall, outside of Beijing, I would catch a glimpse of rural Chinese life, which is very poor. What's more is that it's these rural Chinese people, specifically migrant workers, that are responsible for the development of major Chinese urban cities like Shanghai and Beijing. Migrant workers come to these cities and stay there for months at a time, developing and building the skylines that we see today, like in this photo. And when they come, they sometimes bring their families with them. They stay in temporary housing on the construction site, and they don't enjoy the same rights as urban Chinese people do. For example, healthcare is not the same for them, and education, as we talked about earlier, is not also there for their children. So oftentimes they'll leave their families behind. Their children will either be raised by grandparents or sometimes just on their own. And this is one of the temporary housing units at the construction site. I actually got to visit one with a friend, and we went inside. And during my stay in Beijing, there's a fire in one of the migrant worker communities. And as a result, in order to preserve the safety of Beijing, the government forcefully deported a lot of migrant workers back to the countryside, where there are fewer job opportunities and lower wages. So from staying 9 months in Beijing, it became very clear to me how uneven the development has been in China. I'm getting the 1 minute warning. Another consequence of China's rapid development has been air pollution. Before going to China, and I would see lots of photos of air quality such as this with gray clouds over the city. And this is very true. Beijing, China has an air quality issue. There's even an ongoing joke in Beijing that on such a bad air quality day, you can whip out one of these fresh Beijing air cans, pop it open, and take a few puffs of that. Yeah, and I wore a mask quite often as I was adjusting to the air quality in China, but towards the end of the year, and actually just like a month or two in, I stopped doing this except on the most extreme air quality days. And I remember when there was a fire in Napa County, I called my parents to just make sure they're all right. And they said, yeah, we're fine, but people in our neighborhood are walking around with masks on. And I said, what's the AQI? And they said, it's 150, 158 or so. I said, that's funny. My basketball team only cancels practice if it gets to 700. But I was actually surprised that it was not as polluted as I expected it to be. And in fact, if you look at this graph, the black line being the most recent year leading up until winter of 2017, there's been a lot of improvement. Except for the winter months, the AQI seems to be hovering at about 60, which is not terrible. And so most of the days that I was there, the air quality actually, not the air quality, but the sky actually looked like the lower right photo as opposed to the lower left. And I like to attribute this to Zhongguomeng, or China's dream. Living in China, I got to witness just how powerful the central Chinese government is. With the snap of a finger and the change of a simple policy, they're able to positively affect the lives of over 1 billion people. And China's dream is very different from the American dream. It's a collective dream. Like Professor Dubey was saying earlier, it's to rejuvenate the country. It's to improve the quality of life for all Chinese people. But in order to improve the quality of life for all Chinese people, sometimes small groups of people have to suffer temporarily along the way in order to make this happen. An example I like to pull on is with regards to air quality. In recent years, there have been forced bans on coal use in certain regions of China, which is great because you get clear skies. But for those Chinese people who do not yet have the money or don't have the money to buy electric heating technology, they go cold during the winters. When I was visiting a rural area of Shanxi province where Li Qinqin is actually from, it must be close to there actually. It was like an hour outside of Xi'an. I was visiting a school there, and the teachers and the students expressed to me how during the winter months it was almost unbearable because they didn't have proper heating. Another area which I saw the effects of Zhongguomeng, or China's dream, taking place was with regards to surveillance and accessibility. China surveils and censors its people online and in the real world in order to preserve safety and stability, as they would put it. And this is very clear as you see cameras all over Beijing and all over China. On the left is a camera pole at Tiananmen Square with, I can't even count how many cameras on it. They have every angle covered probably at least twice. And on the right is my classroom with 360-degree cameras placed on the ceiling. And that was the case for every classroom at my school. And so you're always aware of the fact that you're being watched. And as the year went on, especially after Xi Jinping erased presidential term limits, censorship and surveillance increased, and with it, propaganda related to the Chinese dream also increased. I was also reminded of the fact that my accessibility to outside news and the ability to connect with people outside of China was being censored by the fact that anytime I tried to get onto any one of these websites, it was a no-go. And so this was something I had to get used to for a year. Sometimes my VPN would work, sometimes it wouldn't. But that's just something that everyone in China has to live with. And surveillance also affects the lives of people living in China in more subtle ways. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the whole Winnie the Pooh censorship issue in China, but basically there is a resounding acknowledgement that Winnie the Pooh looks like Xi Jinping. And as a result, during times of large government meetings, images of Winnie the Pooh are often censored. I took this picture as I was getting on the subway heading towards Tiananmen during such a government meeting. A Winnie the Pooh balloon had been confiscated and was being kept behind bars. But eventually you adjust to this, and walking past security cameras or security is just like a walk in the park, or in my case, a walk through Tiananmen. And so putting aside my preconceptions, I was able to adjust to and live in China, through which I was able to learn and fully appreciate and understand China. China is a country of a very rich culture and history, and I saw how this is reflected in China's complex and modern, yet traditional society. I want more Americans to better understand Chinese culture and history so that they, in turn, can better understand China itself. I stress learning about Chinese food because not only is it really good tasting, but it reflects a diversity of Chinese backgrounds. And Chinese people are also very enthusiastic about their food. They have a phrase, 民以食为天, or to think of food as heaven. In turn, I think that Chinese people can also benefit from learning more about America's diversity. Chinese people already follow mainstream America a lot. A lot of my Chinese friends follow the NBA. They listen to American music. However, when I first showed up in China, my host family and a lot of my Chinese friends were surprised to see that not all of my American classmates were white. They were also surprised to hear that not all of our political beliefs were the same, and that it wasn't always the case that it was being reflected by what the president or the White House says in the news. And so I think that both sides, China and America, can benefit from closing this understanding gap and learning more about each other's culture, and not just what's mainstream, what you eat in restaurants, what you see on the TV, but also what you don't see, what you have to research, what you have to travel to see. And I think the more this is made accessible, the more U.S.-China relationships will improve. And so in the end, I was very sad to leave behind all the friends and family I had made during my time in Beijing. But I proved to myself that I was able to adjust to and live in China. And this gave me hope that more Chinese people and American people can form the same cross-cultural connections in the future, and hopefully foster a brighter U.S.-China relationship as well. Thank you.